Welcome to Insights. I'm Adam Rivers.
And I'm Sarah Collins. In this episode, we'll reflect carefully on the Qur'an verse by verse, focusing on wording, context, and coherence.
You know, it's truly fascinating to look at how Revelation structures its messages, especially when we start exploring the opening passages of Surah Al-Baqarah.
Oh, absolutely. The architecture there is so deliberate.
Right. And before we even get to the specific verse for this episode, which is Ayah 10, we really have to look at the architecture of the surrounding verses to get our bearings.
Yeah, context is everything here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because if you're listening to this right now and you just open up the Quran to this chapter, you'll see something highly intentional in how it categorizes human responses to the truth.
It really breaks humanity down into these very distinct groups right out of the gate.
It does. The first 5 verses give this very clear, concise description of people who are genuine in their faith. Like their internal reality perfectly matches their external actions.
No contradiction there.
None at all. And then the next 2 verses describe those who outright reject the truth. And again, there is absolutely no ambiguity there. They say what they mean.
Right, it's a completely transparent rejection.
But then Revelation shifts its focus entirely. And it spends the next 13 verses entirely on a third group.
13 verses.
13, which is a massive amount of real estate dedicated to people who verbally claim to believe, but inwardly practice deception.
The disparity in how much focus is given to this third group is exactly what makes this section of the Quran so arresting. I mean, you have 5 verses for the clear believers, 2 for the clear rejectors, and then 13 for this incredibly complex contradictory group.
It really forces you to pay attention.
It does. It introduces a psychological and spiritual profile that requires intense unpacking. The surrounding verses describe individuals who say with their tongues that they believe, and they might even perform all the outward motions of faith perfectly.
Yeah, they blend right in.
Exactly. But what comes before and after this specific ayah establishes that this outward performance is just a hollow shell. They're attempting to deceive the divine and those who genuinely believe.
Which is logically an impossible task.
Right, and Revelation points out the tragic irony there. They are only deceiving themselves, yet they lack the awareness to even perceive it. This sets up Ayah 10 not merely as a historical observation, but as this profound, timeless, spiritual diagnosis.
I want to stop on that word you just used, diagnosis.
Oh, okay.
Because when I read this verse, that is the exact analogy that comes to mind. Think about how we approach physical health.
Right.
If you go to a highly trained specialist, a really good physician doesn't just look at you, see that your hair is combed and your clothes are neat, and say, well, you look fine on the outside, so you must be perfectly healthy.
No, of course not. That would be malpractice.
Exactly. Or you go in with a chronic cough. They don't just, hand you a lozenge to suppress the sound of the cough and completely ignore the underlying lung infection.
They dig deeper.
The Quran here is operating exactly like that expert holistic doctor. It refuses to merely note their outward behavior. It refuses to accept their verbal claims at face value.
It bypasses the superficial symptoms entirely.
Completely. It goes straight to the root cause of why their internal reality is so fundamentally misaligned with their external presentation.
I love that analogy because a master physician listens to the patient's complaints, notes the superficial symptoms, but then puts their finger right on the hidden internal illness.
Yeah.
And the Quran is communicating a very hard truth here. Possessing the vocabulary of faith does not equate to possessing the health of faith.
Wow. Yeah, let's underline that. The vocabulary of faith is not the health of faith.
It's so crucial.
Yeah.
You can know all the right terminology, you can quote the right scriptures, you can seamlessly wear all the cultural markers of piety.
You can look the part perfectly.
But none of that external apparatus matters if the internal operating system is corrupted. Revelation is exposing a terrifying reality here. A person can construct an outward mask that is absolutely flawless to society, yet carry a devastating internal malfunction.
And it's important to note, this malfunction isn't like a lack of IQ, right?
No, not at all. It isn't a lack of intelligence. It isn't a physical disability. It resides in the very center of their spiritual being, in their core capacity to evaluate truth and make moral choices.
Which brings us directly to the profound phrasing at the very beginning of this verse. The ayah starts with the Arabic phrase, fi qulubihim, which translates to in their hearts.
In their hearts.
Yeah, and I want us to spend a significant amount of time unpacking this, because the structural choice here is brilliant. It prioritizes the internal state over external appearances right out of the gate.
This doesn't waste any time.
It doesn't. It doesn't say on their tongues is a lie, or in their actions is deception, even though we know those things are true based on the surrounding verses.
Right, the previous verses literally talk about what they say with their mouths.
Exactly. But when it gets to the diagnosis, it completely bypasses the tongue, the limbs, the outward actions, and goes straight to in their hearts. Why do you think this verse places such absolute, uncompromising priority on the internal state?
I think it places that priority there because Revelation refuses to allow us to judge human reality based purely on superficial metrics. In Arabic grammar, bringing the prepositional phrase fi qulubihim to the very front of the sentence creates a sense of exclusivity.
Oh, like it's saying specifically in their hearts.
Yes, an intense focus. The Qur'an is making a definitive statement that the essence of a human being, the true locus of their identity, their character, their ultimate accountability is internal.
It's all internal.
Right. And think about the era we live in right now. Our modern world is entirely obsessed with external metrics.
Oh, 100%.
We are constantly measuring how we look, what we say, how we present our lives on social media.
The curation of it all.
Exactly. We spend massive amounts of energy curating these perfect, untouchable external avatars. But the Qur'an cuts through all of that curation in 3 words. It announces that the core of the human problem is much deeper than the facade. If the heart is compromised, everything that flows from it, no matter how beautifully it is packaged on the outside, is ultimately tainted.
But let me play the skeptic for a moment, just on behalf of the listener.
Sure.
In our day-to-day lives, we kind of have to judge people by their actions. I mean, if someone gives to charity, speaks kindly to people, doesn't break the law, why should it matter what is going on invisibly inside their chest? Isn't a good action just a good action?
That is a very common way to look at it, but it relies on a very shallow definition of goodness. From the perspective of this verse, an action is not an isolated event. It is a fruit that grows from a root.
A fruit from a root.
Right, and if the root is poisoned, the fruit is inherently dangerous, even if it looks appealing. A person might give to charity, but if the internal motive, the actual state of the heart, is purely to buy social influence or maybe mask a corrupt business practice, then that charity isn't really an act of goodness.
It's PR.
Exactly. It is an act of manipulation. The Quran focuses on the heart because the heart is the engine of human intention. You can fake an action for a long time, but eventually the true state of the internal engine will dictate where the vehicle goes.
That makes me want to dive deeply into the linguistic root of the Arabic word for heart that is used here.
Qalb.
Right, qalb. Because when we say the word heart in English, it usually conjures up 2 very limited images. We either think of the literal physical organ pumping blood through our veins.
Biology.
Biology, yeah.
Yeah.
Or we think of this vague poetic center of romantic emotion, valentines and feelings.
It's emotional heart, right?
But the Arabic word qalb carries a much richer, much more dynamic meaning than just biology or romance, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, and understanding this root is essential to grasping the entire psychological profile being built in this ayah. The word qalb comes from the linguistic root qlb, which means to fluctuate, to turn, to flip, or to change continuously.
To turn or fluctuate, that's so active.
Highly active. In fact, the word for turning a page in a book or flipping something upside down shares this exact same root. It is called qalb precisely because it is constantly turning. It is not a static, unmoving rock sitting inside your chest.
Wow.
It is a highly dynamic, hypersensitive entity. It is constantly being pulled by different motives, rising and falling in its spiritual vitality, fluctuating between certainty and doubt, right and wrong, courage and fear.
So if the very nature of the heart is to constantly turn and fluctuate, how do we differentiate between spiritual health and spiritual disease? Like, what does a healthy fluctuation look like compared to a diseased one?
Think of a healthy heart like a finely tuned compass needle.
Okay.
Even when you shake a compass, the needle fluctuates, right? It wobbles. But it instinctively settles and points toward true north.
It finds its bearing.
Exactly. When a healthy heart encounters evidence, it aligns with it. When it is called to honesty, it gravitates toward it. When it witnesses justice, it softens and embraces it. That is the proper, natural turning of the qalb.
That makes sense.
But when the heart is diseased, this entire navigational function is inverted. The compass is broken. Instead of turning toward the light of truth, a diseased heart turns toward making excuses.
It spins away from the truth.
It spins away. Instead of softening when confronted with a harsh reality, it hardens. It becomes defensive. It perceives the truth not as a cure to be embraced, but as a threat to be neutralized. And so it pivots aggressively toward justification and self-preservation.
That is incredibly relatable. I think anyone listening can identify that dynamic in their own lives, even outside of a strictly religious or theological context.
Oh, for sure. It happens every day.
Yeah. Imagine someone is caught making a mistake at work, or maybe they drop the ball in a relationship. A person with a healthy internal state, a healthy heart, might feel a sharp sting of embarrassment. Their heart fluctuates into discomfort.
Right, they feel that wobble.
But then they turn toward the truth. They soften, they admit the error, they apologize, and they seek to fix it. But someone with a diseased internal state, they will experience that exact same discomfort and immediately pivot to blaming others.
Deflection.
Deflection. They'll create elaborate excuses, gaslight their partner, or attack the person who simply pointed out the mistake. Their heart actively hardens against the reality of their own imperfection.
The fluctuation of the diseased heart is always a retreat away from accountability and a move toward ego protection. And this brings us to the next critical word in the verse, the word that immediately follows, in their hearts.
Right.
The ayah says, fi qulubihim marad, meaning in their hearts is disease. The Arabic word for disease here, marad, has profound linguistic implications that go way beyond just feeling under the weather.
Let's break down that word marad, because in its original Arabic context, it inherently implies a loss of balance, a departure from a natural state of equilibrium.
Loss of homeostasis, basically.
Exactly. Think about how a fever disrupts the physical body. A healthy human body has a perfect internal temperature, a perfect state of homeostasis. When a virus enters, that balance is completely lost. The temperature spikes, you get the chills, your joints ache, and the body's entire system is thrown into chaos. It's a severe departure from the natural healthy state.
Physical disease occurs when an organ or a biological system exits its state of moderation and balance. Your blood pressure goes too high, or your white blood cell count drops too low. But what does this loss of balance mean when applied to a spiritual context?
Right, because we aren't talking about a literal fever here.
No. When the Qur'an says the heart has a marad, what is the equilibrium that has been shattered? In the context of this surah, this equilibrium is the internal scale of truth. A healthy spiritual scale is perfectly balanced. It loves honesty even when honesty hurts, and it hates falsehood even when a lie would bring a temporary material benefit.
It's grounded in reality.
Yes. It leans toward justice regardless of the social cost, and it flees from oppression regardless of the financial temptation.
And here is where it gets really terrifying. Because when that internal scale is broken, a person's entire perception of reality warps.
It gets completely distorted.
The loss of balance means they literally no longer see lying as repulsive. Because their internal temperature is entirely off, their symptoms manifest as a warped worldview. They start to view their own lying as cleverness.
Yes. I'm just playing the game.
Exactly. They see their hypocrisy not as a catastrophic moral failure, but as flexibility. They think they are just being socially adept, politically savvy, or street smart. The disease fundamentally changes their moral taste buds. Bitter becomes sweet, and sweet becomes bitter.
That is the true horror of the spiritual disease described in this verse. The real sickness isn't just being ignorant of the truth. Ignorance can be cured with education.
Right, you just teach someone what they don't know.
Exactly. But the sickness is knowing the truth, recognizing it, and then actively falsifying it so that it no longer requires anything of you. You rebrand your moral failings as virtues. And this is precisely why the grammatical choice of the word marad in this ayah is so significant. The Qur'an uses an indefinite noun here. It says maradon, a disease, rather than saying the disease.
Now, Arabic grammar is famous for hiding massive psychological insights in these tiny structural choices. Why does it matter to the listener whether it is an indefinite noun? What's the practical difference between saying the disease versus a disease in this context?
Using the definite article to say the disease would imply a single, uniform, monolithic flaw. It would mean every hypocrite suffers from the exact same predictable strain of sickness.
Like they all have the exact same virus.
Right. But by using the indefinite form maradon, the verse opens up countless doors of meaning. It suggests that the disease is a complex mixture, a highly customized cocktail of spiritual ailments that adapts to the host.
Oh, wow. It adapts to the person.
Yes. For one person, a disease might be a deep-seated, paralyzing doubt that they are too proud to admit, so they dress it up and wear it as a mask of high intellect and skepticism.
The cynic.
The cynic, exactly. For someone else, their customized disease might be raw, unchecked financial greed that they disguise as pragmatic wisdom or business acumen. Or it could be blinding, narcissistic arrogance that pretends to be a righteous defense of community principles. The indefinite noun tells us that hypocrisy doesn't look the same in every person. It shape-shifts to exploit an individual's specific weaknesses.
That makes it so much more insidious. It's not this glaring, obvious monster that you can easily identify and fight off. It's subtle. And that ties directly into how this disease begins.
It really does.
Because I think it is crucial for anyone listening to realize that this rarely starts as a massive cinematic betrayal of one's core values. Nobody wakes up one Tuesday and decides to completely destroy their internal moral compass.
It's a slow fade.
It begins as something incredibly small. It starts as a tiny, ignored prick of conscience when you exaggerate a story at a dinner party just to look a little better. It starts as a minor, seemingly harmless lie you tell your boss just to escape a momentary inconvenience.
Yes, and because those initial infractions are so small, the person rationalizes them. They think, this doesn't matter. I am still fundamentally a good person. I am still in control of my principles. But that tiny, ignored prick of conscience, that minor lie, gradually hardens into a settled habit.
A habit forms.
And the habit becomes a character trait, and that character trait calcifies into this entrenched, complex disease. The indefinite noun warns us not to underestimate the beginnings of internal imbalance. If you allow a slight millimeter of deviation in the foundation of a building, it might not look like much at ground level.
Right, you wouldn't even notice it.
But by the time that building reaches the 50th floor, that slight deviation leads to the collapse of the entire structure.
And what makes this progression even more dangerous is the environment in which it happens, especially when we consider the context of these verses describing people who claim to be believers.
The religious context.
Yes, there is a massive, lethal danger in using religious rhetoric or any high-minded moral vocabulary as an anesthetic.
Oh, absolutely.
When someone with a healthy heart makes a mistake, they feel the pain of that mistake. And they use that pain as motivation to seek a cure. They apologize, they make amends, they change their behavior. But a person developing this disease uses their vocabulary of faith to artificially soothe their guilt.
That is perhaps one of the most tragic symptoms of this condition. A person might commit a terrible wrong, maybe they cheat someone in a business deal or they slander a family member, and then instead of fixing it, they immediately recite a beautiful verse about divine forgiveness.
Or they post a quote on social media about leaving judgment to God.
Yes. They talk grandly about how only the divine can judge me. They use those beautiful sacred concepts not to fix their mistake, but to silence the screaming pain of their own conscience.
It's weaponized religion.
The vocabulary of faith becomes a tool for self-medication. It becomes a way to build an impenetrable fortress around their ego, so they never have to face the ugly reality of their actions. Religion, for them, becomes a shield against accountability rather than a pathway to genuine transformation.
So we have this devastating picture of a heart that has lost its balance, where lying is a daily habit disguised as cleverness, and the disease is silently compounding. This brings us to a phrase in the verse that often trips people up. And I really want to challenge this point.
Let's do it.
The verse continues. So Allah has increased their disease. Now, if you are listening to this, you might immediately think, wait a minute, they were already sick, they were already struggling with this internal imbalance, and then the divine just arbitrarily made them sicker. Doesn't that remove their free will? How is that fair?
It's the classic question of predestination versus free will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we have to completely dispel the misconception that this is an arbitrary, vindictive punishment from the sky.
It is absolutely crucial to dispel that, because a superficial reading deeply misunderstands the nature of divine justice as it is consistently presented in the Qur'an. We must frame this increase not as a sudden magical curse, but as a universal divine law of consequence.
Law of consequence, okay.
Revelation is describing how reality operates on a spiritual level, much like it operates on a physical level. Let's look at physical laws. If you willingly consume a slow-acting poison and you stubbornly refuse to take the antidote, even when the antidote is repeatedly offered to you, what naturally happens?
You get worse.
Right. The doctor doesn't make you sicker. The laws of biology dictate that your condition will naturally worsen. The poison increases its hold on your system because you allowed it to.
That physical analogy makes perfect sense. The law of biology dictated the spread of the untreated poison. Similarly, in the spiritual realm, the law of consequence dictates the spread of untreated deception. Think about the mechanics of a lie. If someone chooses to lie today to protect their public image, they have just created a fragile fake reality. What happens tomorrow? That fake reality doesn't sustain itself.
No, it needs maintenance.
It requires maintenance. They are forced to tell a second lie to protect the first lie. And the next day, they have to manipulate a colleague or a friend to keep the story straight. They are actively building a compounding web of deceit. The increase in the disease isn't lightning striking them from above. It is the natural, inevitable mathematical byproduct of their own persistent choices.
Exactly. And the Arabic wording here is incredibly precise in confirming this exact mechanism. The phrase begins with the letter fa, fazadahum, which is a conjunction in Arabic that denotes consequence and immediate sequence.
Fa, sa.
It translates roughly to so, or therefore, or as a direct result. The deliberate use of the fa proves that the increase in disease is the logical, immediate result of the individual's prior state and choices. Because they harbored this disease of hypocrisy, and because they nurtured it and protected it rather than fighting it, the direct consequence was that the disease grew.
The seed was watered.
Yes. The conscious choice to deceive simply opens the wide door to further, more profound sickness.
The divine law is simply allowing the seed they planted to grow in the soil they prepared. They chose the path of wearing a mask, and the natural consequence is that the mask eventually becomes permanently attached to their face, suffocating them.
That's a haunting way to put it, suffocating them.
If we connect this specific mechanic to the bigger picture of the Quran, we see this concept consistently repeated. The impact of revelation, the impact of truth when it arrives, depends entirely on the condition of the heart that is receiving it.
This raises a fascinating point about how truth interacts with human psychology. In other instances in the Qur'an, we see that when a heart is genuinely seeking the truth, even if that heart is flawed, even if it has made mistakes, it gains light and clarity when revelation comes to it.
It eliminates them.
Right. The truth acts like a medicine. It cleanses. But what happens to a heart that is already deeply invested in seeking justification for its own hidden agendas? When that diseased heart encounters the exact same revelation, it doesn't find light. It finds only more darkness.
It weaponizes it.
Yes, it takes the truth, it dissects it, and it twists it to defend its own falsehood, thereby actively increasing its own disease. The stimulus, the volts, the truth, the advice is exactly the same. But the reaction is entirely dictated by the health of the internal receptor.
That is such a profound way to look at it. The brilliant light of truth naturally blinds the diseased eye while it illuminates the healthy eye. So the disease increases, the web of lies gets tighter, the heart hardens further, and this transitions us into analyzing the next phrase in the ayah. And for them is a painful punishment.
Wallahum azabun alim.
Right, wallahum azabun alim. I want to delve deeply into the linguistic roots of that word for punishment, azab. Because when we hear the word punishment in English, we immediately think of physical cages or whips or fire. Dungeons, yeah. But azab traces back to a root meaning that is surprisingly poetic and actually much more terrifying when you understand it.
The linguistic root of azab is truly one of the most eye-opening concepts in Quranic Arabic. It traces back to a root meaning sweet, flowing, or smooth water. So when you say man'av, in Arabic, you are talking about water that is pure, sweet, perfectly refreshing, and easy to drink.
Wait, so how does a word associated with sweet, life-giving water become the primary term for agonizing punishment?
It's the contrast. The connection is that azab fundamentally represents the stripping away, the utter and complete removal of life's sweetness, serenity, and peace. It is the absolute deprivation of that pure, refreshing state of existence.
Oh, wow. That completely reframes the entire concept of what punishment actually is.
It does.
It's not necessarily about an external fire and brimstone right away. It's about internal desolation. It is spiritual dehydration. And what is vital for the listener to grasp is that this punishment, this stripping away of sweetness, isn't just something deferred to an ultimate afterlife reckoning.
No, it starts now.
Long before any ultimate judgment day, this azab begins as intense, suffocating psychological torment in this current life. The person who lives a double life, who claims faith, but practices deception, experiences the complete evaporation of all inner peace.
Paint a vivid picture in your mind of what that hypocrite's daily agony actually looks like. Think about the sheer mental load of their existence.
It must be exhausting.
They wake up every single day and have to consciously remember which mask to wear for which group of people. What did I tell my family? What did I tell my coworkers? What did I tell my religious community? They live in constant low-grade terror of exposure.
One slip up and the whole house of cards falls.
Exactly. Every time someone asks a probing question, every time a truth is spoken that hits a little too close to home, their heart rate spikes. They exhaust their own psychological reserves by constantly maintaining a false front. They can never truly relax. They can never truly be known by anyone, because to be known is to be exposed.
It sounds unimaginably exhausting. Their internal contradiction literally rips away their peace of mind. They are drinking from the cup of life, but the water is no longer sweet. It's brackish, bitter with paranoia and anxiety.
Spiritual dehydration.
Yeah, spiritual dehydration. And this connects directly to the adjective used to describe this punishment, alimim, meaning painfully agonizing. It is an intense, penetrating, inescapable pain. And the key here is to emphasize that this pain is perfectly proportional to the crime. They aren't suffering randomly because the universe is cruel.
The proportionality is the very essence of divine justice in this verse. Because they winningly destroyed their internal scale of truth, because they actively chose to construct and live inside an illusion, they must endure the crushing anxiety of sustaining that illusion.
It's cause and effect.
The pain they feel is the agonizing friction between reality and the fake world they've built in their minds. You simply cannot wage war on truth and expect to have a peaceful mind. The alim, the agony, is the natural, unavoidable consequence of a mind tearing itself apart, trying to hold two contradictory realities at the exact same time.
So we have seen the disease, we've seen the natural increase of the disease, and we've explored the resulting psychological agony of losing all sweetness in life. Now let's examine the concluding rationale of this verse.
The anchor of the ayah.
The ayah ends by stating exactly why this entire tragic sequence occurs. Because they habitually used to lie. The Arabic is bimakanu yaksibun. I love how this phrase operates. It perfectly neatly answers any lingering question the listener might have about why this agonizing punishment is completely justified. It removes any claim of victimhood.
It acts as the anchor for the entire verse. It leaves absolutely no room for the listener or the hypocrite themselves to think that they were just a victim of bad circumstances or a harsh divine decree. And the grammatical structure here is magnificent.
How so?
It doesn't just say, because they lied, as a past tense isolated event. It uses the past tense verb kanu combined with the present tense verb yaksibun. In Arabic grammar, combining these two tenses indicates a continuous, ongoing, habitual state.
A lifestyle.
Yes. It isn't describing a single moment of weakness where someone panicked under pressure and told a falsehood. It describes a comprehensive lifestyle. It is an entire existence built upon a foundation of falsehood.
That distinction is so critical for anyone trying to apply this to their own life. We all have moments of weakness. We all make mistakes. But to clarify, lying in the context of this specific ayah is not merely stating a factual error.
It's not getting the time of a meeting wrong.
Right. It's not getting a date wrong or misremembering a historical event or even telling a white lie about liking a friend's terrible cooking. The lying described here is a profound, intentional distortion of one's relationship with reality. It is the active, continuous process of replacing what is objectively true, what is real and divine, with whatever serves their immediate self-interest or protects their fragile ego in that specific moment.
Yes, it is an existential lie. It is a rebellion against reality itself. And we must detail how this habitual lying acts as the ultimate gateway to all other moral failures.
The gateway drug, essentially.
Exactly. When a person trains their heart to comfortably lie about the truth of their own intentions or the truth of revelation, they systematically dismantle the very psychological barrier that prevents deeper evil. If you can lie to yourself and to others about who you fundamentally are, you can easily justify terrible things. You can justify oppression, theft, cruelty, or corruption by simply giving those actions innocent, sanitized names.
We see that dynamic play out in society all the time. You don't even have to look hard. Someone embezzles millions of dollars and ruins lives. But internally, they call it aggressive accounting or being a shark in business.
Or playing the game.
Playing the game. Someone verbally and emotionally abuses their family for years, but they call it tough love or setting firm boundaries. When the internal scale of truth is broken by habitual lying, language itself becomes a tool for manipulation rather than communication. It becomes incredibly dangerous, especially when you have a highly intelligent mind that becomes the willing servant of a diseased heart.
That specific dynamic intelligence serving a diseased heart is terrifying. If you have a diseased heart combined with a low intellect, it might just result in crude, obvious lies that everyone can see through.
Easy to spot.
Very easy. But a diseased heart served by a brilliant, highly educated, articulate mind. That mind will construct elaborate, airtight, philosophical justifications for the most horrific behavior. It will use logic, debate skills, and even academic citations not to find the truth, but to build an unassailable fortress around the lie.
That's a scary thought.
This is why this verse forces us to completely redefine what strength and weakness are in a moral context. True strength, the ultimate display of a healthy heart, is found in the vulnerability of admitting a mistake. But using your intelligence merely to rebrand a mistake, to cleverly argue why you're wrong was actually right, that is not genius. That is a fatal spiritual weakness.
It is the ultimate misuse of human capability. You're using the greatest gift intellect to destroy your own soul. And that brings us to a structural question that I think ties this all together. We have looked at this verse and its profound implications in isolation. But why is this verse positioned so incredibly early in this surah?
That's a great question.
Surah Al-Baqarah is the longest chapter in the Quran. It is foundational to the community's laws, ethics, economics, and social structure. Why put this incredibly detailed, intense breakdown of hypocrisy right at the starting line, before getting into all the laws and the stories?
Yeah.
It seems to serve a very specific protective function for the listener.
It absolutely serves a protective function. It is positioned here to protect the very foundation of the community. Think about what makes any society function. A healthy society, a healthy community of faith, relies entirely on one invisible currency: trust.
Trust.
If I cannot trust that your outward claims match your inward reality, our social contract dissolves. If hypocrisy becomes widespread and if it goes unchecked or unanalyzed, trust shatters. And the devastating collateral damage of a shattered society is that genuine goodness is suddenly viewed with deep suspicion.
Because everyone assumes there's an ulterior motive.
Exactly. If everyone is walking around wearing a mask, then when a truly sincere, good person comes along, society cynically assumes they are just wearing a better, more sophisticated mask. The Quran places this diagnosis early to inoculate the community against the societal rot, and to warn them that hypocrisy doesn't just destroy the individual, it corrodes the entire social fabric.
That is a profound societal insight. If we can't trust each other's basic honesty, we can't build anything together. But as we unpack this immense danger, I want to emphasize a critical boundary for you, the listener.
An important caveat here.
It is so easy when hearing a detailed psychological breakdown of a hypocrite to start mentally assigning this verse to people you know. You'd listen to this and think, oh, that sounds exactly like my old boss, or that perfectly describes my ex-partner, or that's exactly what that politician does. But this verse is not an invitation for you to act as a judge over the hearts of others. We do not possess the diagnostic tools for that. The true state of any heart, the exact mixture of that internal disease, is known only to the divine.
That is a vital, non-negotiable boundary. If we use this verse as a weapon to analyze and condemn others, we are actually succumbing to the very arrogance and disease that the verse is warning us against. Our compass needle is spinning the wrong way.
We've caught the disease ourselves.
Exactly. Instead, we must frame this entire discussion as an urgent and perhaps very uncomfortable mirror for our own self-interrogation. This ayah is demanding that you, the listener, ask yourself hard questions about your own honesty. Where are the areas in your own life where your internal reality doesn't quite match your external presentation?
The blind spots.
The blind spots. When you are alone with your thoughts, are you the same person you project to the world? And more importantly, do you use your intelligence or your social standing or even your religious vocabulary to justify your own small lies?
It's entirely about catching the disease when it's just a tiny symptom, before the fake conjunction kicks in and the disease naturally increases. Let's summarize the tragic chain reaction we've mapped out in this ayah, because it is essentially an inescapable equation of spiritual decay.
It really is an equation.
It starts with a choice. Continuous, habitual lying, even in small things. That continuous lying creates an imbalance, a marad, a disease in the heart. If left untreated and unrepented, the divine law of consequence ensures that the disease naturally increases, compounding upon itself as the lies require more lies. And finally, this uncontrolled increase inevitably produces azabun alim, deep, painful psychological and spiritual agony, stripping all the sweetness and peace out of life.
It is a sobering, terrifying equation. To conclude our reflection on this, we really need to completely dismantle the illusion that lying is a victimless shortcut. So often we tell a lie to avoid a difficult conversation or to get out of trouble thinking we saved time, protected our image, and spared someone's feelings. But the Quran is explicitly telling us that the primary victim of the lie is your own heart.
You're drinking the poison yourself.
Yes. It is not a shortcut. It is a detour into agony. We must urge everyone listening to embrace the cure of brutal self-honesty, catch the lie while it is small, have the courage to endure the temporary sharp pain of admitting the truth before the disease of the heart takes permanent root and permanently strips all the sweetness from your life.
That's it for this episode of Insights.
If you found this reflection helpful, follow the show and join us next time as we continue verse by verse in the Quran.
Until then, take one idea from this verse into your day.